Hello, I'm Rachel Abbott, and this is the Standards Tech and Science Daily Podcast. If you're new here, make sure to hit follow and give us a rating. Coming up, the Dune-inspired sci-fi spacesuits creating drinking water, but from what? Now, let's get into it. The CEOs of Microsoft, Google, Apple and Meta have all condemned the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday.
Take a look at what happened.
The 78-year-old Republican suffered an injury to his ear as a result of the attack, and one member of the audience died. Mark Zuckerberg said political violence undermines democracy and should always be condemned, while Google's Sundar Pichai said political violence is intolerable and we should come together to strongly oppose it. Apple's Tim Cook also strongly condemned the attack, and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said there is simply no place for any type of violence in our society. Now, astronomers say they've created the most detailed and first weather report for two distant worlds beyond our own solar system. The international study has revealed the intense conditions on two brown dwarfs, including 950-degree temperatures and swirling clouds of hot sand. The pair of brown dwarfs are collectively known as WISE 1049ab.
So brown dwarfs are kind of the missing link between planets and stars. So they're kind of like supersized Jupiters. And if you just kept on putting some more and more mass on them, eventually they would become stars, right? So if you get enough mass that they start fusing hydrogen into helium, then they become stars. That doesn't happen until they're about 80 times the mass of Jupiter. So these two objects are both about, one is 30 times the mass of Jupiter, one is about 35 times the mass of Jupiter. And they are some of the closest objects, stars, planets, whatever, from our solar system. They are only about 6 light years away.
That's lead researcher of the report, Professor Beth Biller from the Institute of Astronomy at the University of Edinburgh.
So you've got these storms in these atmospheres. They're also rotating very quickly. One of them is rotating every 5 hours. The other rotates every 7 hours. To give you comparison, Jupiter in our own solar system has a rotational period, i.e. a day, of about 10 hours. So the combination of this fast rotation and these storms in their atmosphere mean that we can see these objects getting brighter and dimmer with time as different cloudy and clearer regions rotate in and out of view. So that's how we're mapping the weather on them.
Using NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, the international team tracked each brown dwarf's atmosphere by measuring the light waves emitted from their surfaces, which change as more or less cloudy regions revolve in and out of view.
So the James Webb Space Telescope lets us observe at wavelengths that we simply cannot observe from the ground because they're essentially blocked by our own atmosphere. And that means that we're able to cover pretty much almost all of the infrared spectrum. So these are wavelengths a bit longer than what we can see with our own eyes. And it's also where these objects are emitting the most light. That's where they're brightest. So it's the best wavelength range to observe them at.
Professor Biller says that their findings show we're on the cusp of understanding worlds beyond our own. She explains how eventually the techniques they are refining here could help us to detect weather on habitable planets like our own.
Longer term, with future telescopes like the Habitable Worlds Observatory, the goal is to start imaging exo-Earths, so planets like our own, orbiting stars like our own. And the techniques that we're developing here, once we've imaged some exo-Earths, we could apply them to look at their weather.
Next, research by the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association and UCL suggests assistance dogs are avoiding London's floating bus stops because they deem them unsafe. These stops are where a cycle lane separates the bus stop from the pavement, which are causing significant challenges for blind and partially sighted people. UCL civil engineering professor Nick Tyler said that in their lab recreations of the bus stops, guide dogs didn't assess them as safe places for their owner. It follows concerns about injuries at floating bus stops and calls for their redesign, but TfL says they are undertaking an extensive review of bus stop Next, US researchers say they've developed a urine recycling and collection system which can be carried on the back of the next generation of astronaut spacesuits. The scientists from Cornell University say their designs were inspired by the fictional still suits from the Dune films. They're also working to recycle bodily fluids to transform them into drinking water via a silicone collection cup and neutralizing filter system, along with the addition of electrolytes. The designs were published in Frontiers in Space Technology. Let's go to the ads. Coming up, the scientists assembling the entire genetic code of an extinct woolly mammoth and some very angry birds. Make sure to hit follow and rate in the meantime. Welcome back. An international team of researchers has taken preserved DNA from a woolly mammoth fossil to create a 3D reconstruction of its genetic code for the first time. Scientists extracted mammoth DNA from 52,000-year-old remains in Siberia using a skin sample taken behind the beast's ear. Olga Dachenko from the Center of Genome Architecture at Baylor College of Medicine believes the mammoth spontaneously freeze-dried shortly after its death, essentially preserving its DNA in a glass-like state. The study, published in the journal Cell, also reveals how the team combined the ancient DNA with genomes from modern-day elephants to complete their reconstruction. Next, surveillance drones monitoring beaches in New York are being attacked by some angry birds. UAVs have been deployed to check for sharks and even come complete with inflatable life rafts that can be dropped to swimmers in distress. But the Associated Press reports territorial local seabirds, such as the American oystercatcher, have been swarming the technology, forcing local authorities to change flight paths. They apparently think the drones are predators threatening their chicks. And finally,
the mere sight of your blade sets my heart aflutter.
According to Game Rant, a clip has appeared on Reddit of one very lucky player of Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree beating one of the game's most challenging bosses, Mesmer the Impaler, simply by throwing huge rocks. Rocks, you ask? Correct. Players have found it near impossible to take him down, even with the best weapons and spells, and this rock-throwing technique has surprised players. Soon after the game was actually released, the studio had to issue a small fix as gamers complained about the title's difficulty. You're up to date. Come back at 4 p.m. for the Standard podcast for all the latest news and analysis. Tech and Science Daily will be back tomorrow, Tuesday at 1 p.m.